It may come as no surprise to you that I am a fan of game development. Every aspect of creating a game is enjoyable to me, from coding to art to design. Making something cohesive and fun has always been something that I've strived to do. However, my biggest flaw when it comes to game dev and projects in general is that I don't often find a motivation to finish a project. I either find some kind of roadblock that prevents you from moving forward, or just lose the will entirely to keep going. However, a unique opportunity presented itself with this year's GMTK Game Jam. Considering I had been programming with Godot for a while due to other projects, I felt fully confident in my ability to make something quick for this game jam. Something that I hadn't been able to do before because of my own lack of skill with certain engines, or again due to my lack of motivation to keep going forward. However, finishing this game wouldn't be easy, as at the same time as the game jam was my birthday weekend, and I already had plans laid out that would keep me away from coding. So how difficult was it? It was really easy. I completed it a day before the deadline. However, there's still a story to tell, so be sure to subscribe and let's get right into it. The first day happened when the game jam first started, and the entire time I was deliberating whether or not to join the jam in the first place, considering I had failed in the past to even make something cohesive. That was when I had the idea to follow a tutorial. And yes, this does fall in line with the rules of the jam. It is stated that I can use pre-existing code, which is what the tutorial was. We're good here. The tutorial was really helpful and explained how its basic systems work, allowing you to customize things to your liking. This tutorial is actually how I learned the most important tool I would find in my Godot career. See, before, while I was developing other projects, I would simply have one script for one scene that controlled everything, from calculating score to controlling how the buttons worked. Yes, I really looked like yandere dev there. And while it did keep things simple, it also made it terribly difficult to find where specific functions were placed. So for example, if I wanted to find a function for the scoring loop, I'd either have to scroll all the way down or use Godot's function finder. Either way, it would bloat the script file and make it difficult to test and debug things. It also had the side effect of causing duplicate code, as I didn't know what globals were for a long time. Meaning I had to have separate copies of the same function in each script, rather than just having one function that all of my code would reference. Safe to say, after the game jam was over, I changed the structure of my other projects drastically, moving every common and duplicate function from inside the main script into a global script. Things that were not necessarily linked to a GUI would also be moved as well into their own components, keeping the main script super tidy and letting specific nodes handle different tasks. Anyways, back to day 1. On the night of day 1, I finally decided to join the game jam with the idea of making a farming simulator that would loop every 7 days, resetting your progress until you finally made enough money to break out of the loop. You still kept the money you made from previous loops, but you had to start over in every other aspect. Day 2, I didn't have the idea to make a video on the process of this game jam until halfway into the day when I was having a lunch break. Wow, I'm such a good YouTuber, guys. You should totally subscribe. So I just got back from lunch. I didn't get the idea to start recording my dev sessions until just now, and I'm like somewhat decently far along. It's just very basic right now. I haven't made any animations yet, but I will start doing that soon. Yeah, I'm sure in the video I'll probably explain what the fuck I'm doing. Much of this day was following the start of the tutorial, making the initial art for the game, and laying the groundwork for what was to come. That included basic character movement, keyboard inputs, and FSMs, or finite state machines, which is something I never thought I would actually have to use outside of my coding classes. But suffice to say, knowing about this stuff beforehand probably helped me in understanding how it would work in my game. It also probably allowed me to learn how they actually worked in the context of game dev, and potentially helped me learn how to use it in other projects. This also is how I learned about signals and how useful they are. See, I've been using signals before, but instead of having them be custom set by me, I would usually have them connected to actions like buttons being pressed. However, that only scratched the surface of how useful signals could be. Think of them like the broadcast block in Scratch. Does any of my audience even use Scratch? Essentially, it allowed you to run a function on another node without having to have hard references to that node, which is often seen as bad practice in Godot. It also has the benefit of allowing multiple nodes to receive a signal, which was incredibly useful as it allowed me to perform multiple actions across nodes. You'll notice too that Godot is an object-oriented language, much like Unreal and Unity and pretty much every single game engine out there. The only difference between other game engines and Godot is that every object is what is called a node, and you can save nodes as individual scenes as well. For explaining purposes, scenes are to nodes like what squares are to rectangles. Not all nodes are scenes, but all scenes are nodes themselves. I'm sure someone in the comments who is better at me at Godot can explain it better. Anyway, I continue to develop the game, adding the UI elements as well as completely misunderstanding how regions and subregions worked. I also forgot that the canvas in my pixel art editing program was set to 32 pixels by 32 pixels when the typical tile size of my project was 16 pixels by 16 pixels. This would end up biting me in the ass later. I also got the player to actually be able to use tools, and overall day 2 felt very cool because I got to do so much in so little time. It was the first time I ever felt at ease when developing a game. However, day 3 would turn out to be a little different. Okay, so we got a lot done today. I'm very proud of myself for making 2 crops and being able to get all this work done in like just a few hours, I would say, like 9 hours actually. I mean, considering the only 2 things you really, I mean, I guess I could add more crops. That could add a level of complexity. And I'll probably come back to this later in a bit before I go to bed. Tomorrow I have a big day, so I'm probably not going to be able to work on this super well, but I guess we'll see. Yeah. Day 3 was the day I had plans with a bunch of my friends. And yes, I do have friends, and no, I can't show you pictures. I was pretty lucky though, as our plans started in the morning and ended in the afternoon, still giving me enough time to code. Okay, so it is day 2 of, well, I guess technically day 3 because day 1 was just me deciding if I wanted to do it and also getting the idea started. But this is day 2 of me coding everything for the Game Jam game. I feel like I'm really close to the end. I really just need to make, like, I need to get the base first, like the stuff that the tutorial is teaching me, because I'm following the tutorial. And then I can like make it like uniquely me. My ultimate goal is to potentially be able to have 1 loop setups, but we'll see about that. Anyway, back to coding. Day 3 was the fun part, because it took me through being able to add the ability for the player to hoe the ground and actually plant seeds. Now it's truly starting to become a farming sim. I also added a pickaxe haphazardly because I wanted to be able to remove tilled ground and crops without having to do the boring option they did in the video, which definitely took some time to debug. I also learned about Godot's particle system, though I only had a small run-in with it. Day 3 was also when I started learning how to use resources to save data. There are 3 main ways to save data in Godot games, and the 2 that I am familiar with is config files and resources. Config files usually are used for just that, config files, though they can certainly be used to save other data like player data in a really simple and easy way. And while it is an insecure way to save player data like that, as people could just open the file whenever they wanted, there is an option to encrypt it to make it harder for people to decode. Then there's resources, which also allow you to save, but it's probably more practical for a game like this because it allows you to save so many other things. For my purposes, I use it to store node data, so stuff like variables, positions, and so much more. I assume it was used in a project like this because the project required saving a lot of data from every single node. From crop positions to player positions to what tiles were tilled, it was just so much simpler to save stuff this way than to save it all manually to a configuration file. I didn't try it that way, but I'm sure it would have been leagues more difficult to just save it to a configuration file. Sorry, I'll stop glazing resources now. The point is, my game was starting to become more like a game now with an actual save and load system. I love how I forget to record me making this like UI screen. Look at this chat. Look at this chat. It looks so cool. And then I'm planning on making it so that it can switch between two scenes seamlessly. I know that's probably not how most Godot programmers would do it, but it's how I'm gonna do it. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. Anyways, I'm gonna still record. I'll catch you later. I also started working on the visual aspect of the day and night cycle, as well as adding in an NPC. This is where it really started to go off the rails, because the tutorial suggested I make use of a dialogue manager add-on script. Wow, that was a lot of buzzwords. Since I didn't have time to learn how to use that, and because I had experience with Godot's UI system already, I just made my own shop system. I really only needed an NPC to allow me to buy and sell things anyways. I'm sure if this were a more expansive farming sim like Stardew Valley, I would have needed a dialogue option. But seeing as this was just you and the shop NPC on this island, it is much simpler to do this instead. Okay, so, y'all didn't see it, but I managed to get everything working all together now. And then it'll show the shop, and then I can do some hoeing. Now we're gonna get to work on making a main menu for it and making the sounds. Yeah. This is also where I started adding my own unique flair to the project, as I did add in some cute dialogue that you wouldn't normally be able to see if you just bought and sold from this guy. Be sure to download this game and see if you can find the cute dialogue. On day 4, I started making the main menu and finding fonts for the game, which are, in my opinion, pretty darn important for games. A game's font can often shape its identity, and a good font and a bad font can make or break a title like this. Maybe I was a graphic design major in a past life. Regardless, I had a ton of fun creating the UI for this game, and it was really cool to finally see it coming together after all this time. I had been following the tutorial for 4 whole days, and it felt amazing to have done all that work in so little time. Though you're probably wondering, if I'm just following a tutorial, how is this going to fit the theme of looping that they set out for us? Well, day 4 is when I started to make the game unique, as that's when I implemented the looping mechanic and the scoring system. I eventually decided on making it 14 days to loop, as 1 week would have been way too restrictive, especially with the later plant designs I made. I also added a loops counter, as that allowed me to allow the player to unlock new plants the longer they looped. Then the scoring system kept track of how much money you made in that loop, and if you had enough money made by the end of the loop, you would win. A pretty simple objective. So in case y'all didn't see over the flashing lights, I just made it so that it actually loops now. So now it'll keep track of how many loops you did, and then it'll set the initial time again, so it'll be like you have a fresh start. Well, I guess we'll just see what happens. A lot of day 4 was spent making new stuff and then debugging that new stuff. I also made music for the game, which I'd like to have just a brief ramble about. For having a pretty good score in my music theory classes, I struggled to make a good theme for my game. I really didn't know how to start, especially when I tried making something not using notation I was familiar with. For context, I was a violinist in most of my primary schooling years, so most of my reading abilities for music was in sheet music. The program I was using simplified it to bars, and while that does make it less abstract, I did have trouble visualizing notes and chords and all of that fun stuff. In the end, I stuck with a pretty simple theme, which I do admit is pretty bad. Anyways, I also made a house for the player to stay in and to return to when a loop occurred, and fixed up the saving system, allowing the save to also be deleted from the title screen, which also took a while to debug. I also added more crops, and the system that revealed the new crops when you unlock them, so you don't just get spoiled and overwhelmed. I then added a congratulations screen for when you made enough money, and spent a long time debugging that as well. Again, it was adding new features and then debugging them. I was a bit worried I wouldn't be able to finish the game with all the debugging I was doing, but I just kept pushing forward. In this day, I also finally fixed the issue I was having where you would be able to walk into the sea. I don't know why this happened or why the tutorial file never talked about it, but I ended up remedying this by just adding collision to the edges of ground sprites. Simple but effective. And with that, I pretty much had everything I needed to complete the game. To finish it off, I made an icon for the game, exported it, zipped it up, and shipped it out to itch.io. You can find a link to the game in the description below if you want to try it out. It felt surreal finally being able to finish a game. For years I had been making projects in Unity, Unreal, and Godot. Never before had I been able to confidently release one, until day 4 at this very game jam. And for that, I'm so proud of myself. While at the time of writing this, the rating period is still going on, I will say that even if I don't end up getting featured or quote-unquote winning the game jam, I still had a ton of fun making the game and thoroughly enjoyed being able to finish one for once in my life. In fact, I was so encouraged by being able to finish a game that I hopped onto my other project and developed it enough to release a playtest version of the game, which you can also find on my itch.io page. If you decide to download either game and give either of them a try, I do hope you have a ton of fun. Please do give me feedback though, as I am just a single guy and can't tell if my games are fun or not alone. I might be a bit biased. But yeah, in summary, making a game is a ton of fun, though it's probably best to start out with something small first. Believe me, I've tried developing numerous dream games before without much idea on how to even start on them. Spending time doing your research and learning how game engines work will save you so much headache in the future. Heck, making a game for Jam helped me learn how to best structure my personal projects, so I didn't just jam every function in the universe into one script. And with that, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. Go download both games if you want. The links are down in the description, and I'll see you all in the next one.